Hey, everyone.
Hi, Counselor. How are you this evening?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. We are going to get started in just a moment.
No worries.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining the Boston Food Access Council's virtual mayoral forum. My name is Christine Becker, and I serve as co-chair for the Mayor's Food Access Agenda Working Group within the Boston Food Access Council. It has been a privilege to work alongside several BFAC members over the past weeks in planning this evening's event. Thank you to everyone who's contributed to make tonight possible. The Boston Food Access Council, also known as BFAC, brings community voices together to create access to affordable, just, culturally connected, healthy, and sustainable food in Boston. Later this evening, we'll share more about our work. But for now, let's get into the forum. Thank you to the candidates for joining us this evening. This forum is nonpartisan, and the Boston Food Access Council will not be endorsing a candidate in the mayoral race. We are hosting this evening's event to share the candidates' positions on food access with our members and the broader community. As many of you know, the food landscape is rapidly changing as a result of COVID-19 and a new presidential administration. It requires the mayor to adapt to ensure we're maximizing food access for residents in Boston. Just today, there was breaking news from the USDA around the largest increase in SNAP benefits ever to exist that will become effective in October. We look forward to seeing how our candidates plan to address these changing policies to benefit our residents. With that, I'd like to introduce our moderator for this evening. Lauren Palumbo serves as the co-chair for the Boston Food Access Steering Committee and is Chief Operating Officer at 11 Spoonfuls, a food recovery organization serving Massachusetts and based in Austin.
Thank you, Christine, and thank you as well to the many BFAC members who participated in the planning efforts for this evening. I'd also like to take a moment to acknowledge our partner organizations who supported BFAC in raising awareness for tonight's forum, and they are the Greater Boston Food Bank, the Food Project, Fourth Presbyterian Church, About Fresh, Rescuing Leftover Cuisine, and the place where I spend my days, 11 Spoonfuls. For the attendees this evening, Spanish translation is available. Please select the interpretation button or the thing that looks like the globe at the bottom of your screen to switch to the Spanish channel if needed. In addition, chat has been disabled, but we do encourage attendees to use the Q&A feature to ask questions throughout the evening. And our team will be working behind the scenes to select questions to put before the candidates, in addition to the questions which BFAC has already prepared. Tonight's forum is broken into three 30-minute segments, and for this first segment, we are joined by Councillor Asaibi George and Councillor Wu. We will give each candidate 2 minutes to make opening statements, and then we will begin with our questions, which were submitted and compiled by BFAC members. Candidates will then have 60 seconds to answer each question, and we will alternate who goes first. Each group of candidates will respond to the same questions. And candidates, when the timer on screen expires, we will mute you. So please, let's get started. Anissa, we're going to kick it to you to kick us off with your 2-minute introduction.
Thank you very much, Lauren, and thank you everyone who's joining today and this evening for the series of conversations with the candidates running for mayor. I'm happy to be here tonight with Michelle to introduce myself and to talk about a topic that we know is so important. And I think that we've seen how important it has truly become, especially over this last year and a half. My name is Anissa Saibi-George. I'm very proud to be an at-large city councilor and candidate for mayor. I'm a mother, I'm a former classroom teacher, a small business owner, and those experiences, as well as my 6 years on the council, have informed my work, and I hope to be able to continue to lead in so many areas, whether it's education, whether it's economic development, whether it's supporting our families who are experiencing homelessness or dealing with food insecurity, as I know tonight's topic will certainly cover. I look forward to continuing to do that as mayor of this great city, and hope to earn those listening and tuning in tonight your support, certainly your encouragement over the course of the next 4 weeks. But I'd say most important, your partnership. Those of you that are tuned in tonight, those of you that have made this evening possible, those of you that have continued to do this important work around food security for our city's most vulnerable. You need to have a seat at the table when we talk about food policy, when we talk about improving access, and the work that we need to do to make sure that no family, no child, no senior citizen, no resident of this great city of Boston goes without. I'm grateful for the opportunity to discuss all of that and so much more with you this evening. And I see that I've got 20 seconds left. I also have Astro the dog beside me distracting me slightly, so I've lost my train of thought, but grateful to be with you and look forward to the discussion this evening.
Thank you, Counselor. Michelle, I will restart the timer.
Good evening, everyone. Happy to be here with you all and Anissa, and to get the chance to really dive into a very important, foundational, and yet often overlooked important policy area in our city. I am someone who has served on the council for 8 years now, and just so honored to be part of this historic field running for mayor. But the very origins of my journey into public service comes through food. I was 23 when my mom was struggling with a mental health crisis, and to try to keep our family going, to try to help her and my sisters and myself and our larger community, I opened a little tea shop serving dumplings and cookies and hosting open mic nights and poetry readings. And I know just how foundational food is, from not just the perspective of how we all have to sustain ourselves every day, but from the jobs it creates, the sense of community and culture it can open up, the implications for health and climate. And we often talk about all of these issues either in a very quickly passing way or in a very siloed way. And I'm proud that on the City Council, my portfolio of work includes some major accomplishments that the entire council passed in this space. One was our landmark food justice ordinance, where we became the first city in the Northeast to ensure that all spending on food through city dollars, mostly focused on BPS, has to fulfill several criteria around local production, health and nutrition, fair labor standards, environmental sustainability, and racial equity. Imagine what could happen if the city of Boston led the way for a vision across all of our departments and agencies that other sectors could align with and plug into. We can break down these silos and make sure that we are creating opportunity for everyone and stabilizing our communities.
Thank you, Counselor. According to recent data from Feeding America, the food insecurity rate in Suffolk County is 13.2%. Or put another way, more than 100,000 residents do not know where their next meal is coming from. Federal nutrition programs such as school meals, summer meals, SNAP, and WIC are some of our best lines of defense against hunger. These programs serve as great tools to mitigate food insecurity and promote nutrition in Boston, yet are often underutilized due to the lack of awareness and concerns around eligibility. For example, Project Bread estimates that in 2019, just over half of eligible students ate free or reduced price school meals, and less than 1 in 8 ate a free summer meal in the city of Boston. As of March of this year, roughly 66,000 Boston residents eligible for SNAP are not receiving benefits. The question that I pose to you is, if elected, how do you plan to use your role on the national stage to protect and enhance these programs? And how do you aim to leverage and maximize these federal nutrition benefits by increasing access points, which will ultimately close these gaps? Michelle, you will take this one on first.
Okay, 1 minute. We have one of the largest SNAP gaps anywhere in the city of Boston, and I was proud to lead the charge on the council, although disappointed that it has remained an area where we need advocacy to ensure that we are pushing the state to opt into and implement universal enrollment and access. When we know where these families are, when we know that there are language barriers, that there are multiple touch points within government, the least we can do is ensure that we're closing that enrollment gap. The city can also use the other touch points we have, whether it's through our farmers markets and continuing to ensure that SNAP dollars can be easily used with the technology and the equipment and breaking that stigma, or any other places we are simplifying enrollment through Boston Public Schools. And I will also advocate at the national level for continued progress.
Thank you. Anissa.
So I appreciate that you recognize the very national role that the mayor of Boston can play. And when we think about utilizing that capacity, that role, that power that comes with being mayor of the city of Boston, it's important that we do so. And certainly to work in partnership with all of you, again, that are doing this work, that inform, I believe, and should continue to inform the mayor's office on those pieces. But it's taking that bully pulpit, that sort of honor and responsibility to work again in partnership with all of you to leverage those funds, those dollars, and that presence. But we have to do it in partnership with those that are doing the work. Certainly when we think about the work of the Greater Boston Food Bank, when we think about the pantries across our city, when we think about the organizations that are doing food delivery, especially this last year, and especially to our youngest residents, we need to make sure that we are still funding that and supporting that and really meeting our city's people exactly where they are. So in our schools, in our community centers, and in our senior centers. We can't forget so many of our older Bostonians who have lived in isolation this year. It's my commitment.
Thank you, counselors. Okay, now to the topic of wasted food. There are great organizations in Boston working to reduce wasted food and lessen food insecurity. These organizations are key players in achieving both the Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection's waste reduction goals, as well as the city's own zero waste plan. How do you plan to support their efforts? And Anissa, you will take this one first.
And I've got my 1 minute. I'm going to try to stick to it so I don't get muted. I think, again, this is about partnership, especially when we think about how vulnerable our city's residents are and how do we make sure that we are working with those that are leading the way around things like access in that last question. And here, when we think about reducing food waste, the city of Boston doesn't have to do all this work. It needs to support the organizations that are doing it day in and day out and have become certain experts in it. So for me, and again, it's about creating space at the table for them to lead the agenda and lead the mayor's agenda in these efforts. So for me, it's not about doing it. It's about bringing those voices, those experiences, and those very certain expertise to the table to help me as mayor lead on this.
Thank you. Michelle.
There's so much we can do at the city level, and I know the city council has been pushing for many, many years. So a special shout out to our colleague, Councilor Matt O'Malley, who reliably every year makes sure that we're talking about composting and has had the support of the council in moving that advocacy forward. We know that it matters. We know that the cost of not diverting food waste sustainably is hitting the city budget and then using up those resources. There are private models that demonstrate just how effective this is and how much interest is out there. Dorchester's Cereal Cooperative is a great example. We need to make sure that wherever we can, whether it's through the Boston Public Schools and meals, we're demonstrating this and making food composting available citywide. We also should be supporting local food rescue organizations, some of which are represented here, because this is an issue not just of health and eliminating waste, but economic benefit too.
Thank you. Our next question speaks to the Good Food Purchasing Program, which, I believe you both know, City Council enacted in 2019. And that aims to use food procurement practices to improve food systems in the areas of nutrition, workers' rights, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, and local economies, while supporting a more transparent and racially just system. Please address how you would support successful implementation of this program. And Michelle, you will take this one first.
This is one of my babies on the council. I was proud to draft this in coalition with a huge group of advocates from around the city, representing various of the organizational areas mentioned in our focus, and starting to lay the groundwork for how the city of Boston, through our modeling of good food purchasing, could build the template for hospitals who are serving hundreds of thousands of patients and visitors, universities serving their students and faculty, to keep building that bulk purchasing power. We have $18 million of purchasing power just through BPS. It's at least $100 million annually for local jobs, healthy, nutritious food, environmental sustainability, if we can set that standard. And so I've pushed not just to pass this ordinance and to make Boston a trailblazer when it comes to this area, but to follow up in implementation and work closely with the BPS Office of Food Services to make sure we're moving forward.
Thank you. Anissa?
You know, this is a great question because I think it demonstrates how, as a city, we too often work in silos. And when we think about my administration, my experience in the Boston Public Schools, and how important the work that we're doing around food service is for our young people, we think about what we've done as a city to make sure that we're able to get food in the quantities and at the volume in community, especially this last year and a half. And we think about the work that we need to be doing around workers' rights and economic opportunities, how we create that here in the city of Boston, as it often doesn't relate to conversations around food. As a city and as mayor, my cabinet will be certain to not work in those silos, that we are bringing all of these elements together to make sure that we are doing the good food purchasing effort, that we are doing it in partnership and across departments. When we get out of our silos, we're able to be more effective in our work.
Thank you. Okay, our next question is going to turn to urban farming. One important role for urban farms has been to support farmers markets in neighborhoods which have had a hard time attracting and maintaining commercial farms at their markets. This is a tough business. Article 89 resulted in the creation of new urban farms, but there are still many cost and bureaucratic barriers which have slowed this process. What is your perspective on the need for urban farms, and what will you do to support this process and support farmers markets? This one goes to you first, Anissa.
We have to create that direct line from farm to table, and it can go right through our farmers markets in every one of our communities. And certainly we do that in partnership with programs that are supporting our city's residents and accessing that fresh food. The more we have urban farms, the quicker turnaround, the more direct opportunity our city's residents have to access those fresh foods, and to access the opportunity to learn about the importance of fresh food, the importance of nutrition, and making sure at the same time, we can do this through community farmers markets and growing our food locally, we can create culturally sensitive and appropriate foods for our communities. We can respond to the diversity of our city. We need to do this, again, in partnership with those that are growing our food, those that are connected to our community, and our city's residents, who should be getting what they need to feed their families.
And Michelle.
Urban farming and farmers markets and how this is all linked together. This is a racial and economic justice issue. And that's why it was one of the core planks in our food justice agenda that I was proud to release very, very early on in our campaign, way back in October of 2020. And so please check out our website if you want more details. You can see the whole plan there. The bottom line is that this is an area where Boston has led in the past. We are home to the very first farmers market anywhere in the country, 1634. And we continue to be a city with very vibrant neighborhood farmers markets that are connected to urban agriculture, but they're often not coordinated in various ways, either the timing, the location, the offerings, the commitment across the board to being able to close the SNAP gap through that. And so we can break down silos here as well and ensure that we are connecting jobs, health, and building.
Okay, our next question actually comes from the audience. And the question is, what role do you think community gardens play in food access? And what would you do to expand support that role if elected? And this question comes from Michelle in the audience. And I believe, Michelle, you are first up to answer it.
Thank you, Michelle. In some ways, closely tied to the conversation about urban agriculture, but community gardens are another place where we see the intersection of so many advances and neighborhood community building, power building activities. This is an example where one community after another in our city has taken it on to make sure that our push for racial justice aligns with community building and economic empowerment right in each neighborhood. And so we know the wait list to get your plot at the local community garden is very long. We can support at the city level, identifying vacant parcels of land, moving that through the planning and development process, helping provide assistance with soil testing and mitigation and preparing those plots, and working with so many of the organizations that have done this already all across our neighborhoods.
And Anissa.
Oh, this is a great question. Just last week, I was at a local community garden in Jamaica Plain, and the week before that at one in the South End. And we think about the great ones that exist in every one of our communities across this great city. Some have more than others. And when we think about community building, when we think about the opportunity to bring people together and to then offer opportunities, not just for education, but for growing food here locally and growing, again, that culturally appropriate food, and using that as an opportunity to educate our city's residents, our city's kids about nutrition, about the soil, about the earth, and about the opportunity to connect again with each other and nutritious food. Our community gardens play such an important role in that. And there is still some inequity among our community gardens around resources and information and tools. And we can do that. And as mayor, I will support those efforts. I will support those gardens, and not just with my words, but with our city's resources.
Thank you. Our next question speaks to language barriers. Many members of the immigrant community cannot read their native language, let alone English. What is your plan for leveraging multilingual resources developed by organizations like Project Bread to increase awareness and bridge language barriers, to expand access to city resources for those with limited reading skills, including ways to close the SNAP gap, as we talked about before, in non-English speaking and elderly communities? Anissa, you will take this one first.
No, this is a great question, because I think it demonstrates very clearly where municipal government, where I as mayor and our administration can really lead the way in the partnership we need to have with, whether it's the Greater Boston Food Bank or locally run food pantries, or with our community gardens. That is the resource, that's the technical assistance, that is the work that we can do for you and with partnership with you. We can reach the city's residents in a way that maybe your organizations aren't tied in. And we can reach our city's residents in the languages they speak. We can find them in the community-based organizations in which they exist. We can go to our kids in our schools and work with our families and our senior citizens, and do that in culturally competent ways, and certainly in, again, the languages they speak. That can be, we should be the vehicle for which you get your work done and fulfill your mission as organizations that are supporting our city's residents across the board.
And Michelle.
You know, just earlier today, a couple hours ago, I was at a meet and greet with seniors in one of our senior buildings, and the event itself was bilingual because there was a significant portion of residents who spoke Mandarin only. And as we closed the event and all went outside and left, I noticed a grouping of residents standing at the billboard, sorry, not the billboard, the bulletin board right outside in the space. And they were pulling me over saying, what does this flyer say? Because that's where the important notices go. And it was only in English, so they couldn't read it. But there were pictures, and it said free food boxes available these dates at these 2 locations in Fenway. And just one example of how our residents are being left out of very important resources and all the work that's happening. So I was proud to write and pass the city's first language access ordinance several years ago, but the work goes beyond that, making sure we're connecting it all the way to community.
Great, thank you. And for the final question, before we give you a moment to do some closing statements, as mayor, you will have the power to change the food system, both immediately and in the long term. How do you plan to bolster the efforts of the Office of Food Access as it works in partnership with local food system organizations? And Michelle, you'll take this one first.
I'm so excited about this. In fact, when I was interning for Mayor Menino, a decade ago, I had the chance to work with the very, very early iteration of this office when Edith Murnane was in that role, and we brought food trucks to the city, and we're just starting to see what was possible. Since then, in some ways, the silos across the city have been reinforced by the way that this office is set up. And so the very first thing that I will do is to make sure that we are not putting food access separate from economic development and our restaurants and bodegas and small businesses, but making sure that the whole ecosystem of food, health, nutrition, and jobs are connected together. Second, in some ways, I've laid all of this out as through our food justice agenda. So it will be a matter of pressing play on a lot of the initiatives. These are already developed in partnership with local organizations and experts. We will be the leading city when it comes to connecting all these issues with economic opportunity, health, and climate.
And Anissa?
My commitment, I think all of the candidates for mayor are committed to strengthening the mayor's office of food access. And through that work, we combat together food insecurity, and we create more opportunities for healthy and fresh food to be available and affordable. And we need to make sure that we're coordinating distribution efforts and doing that work in partnership with all of you. And really, in many ways, letting you lead on that work. We need to also invest in and expand mobile healthcare resources, because food is health, and the Office of Food Access has that mobile food pantry. We need to really do that work and make sure that our city's residents, regardless of the language they speak, the community that they live in, the size of the family, the age of the family, or the language spoken, has opportunities and access to nutritious, culturally competent food. And we have to make sure that we're embracing the whole city when we think about food access, and again, doing it in partnership with.
Okay, well, we have a moment for both of you to give a 60-second closing statement before we move into the next segment of tonight's forum. So Anissa, we'll start with you.
I'm just grateful for the opportunity to talk with you about the importance of food access and food security, and the important, and we all recognize the important role it plays in keeping our families obviously fed, but also stable. And by extension, how that creates opportunities for our young people to engage in their academics, how it creates opportunities for families to go to work and to be part of the community, and certainly our older Bostonians to not live in isolation. We need to make sure as a city that we're working every day to create improved access points, whether it's simply a shuttle service for an older Bostonian to that local farmer's market, or making sure that our kids are getting food that is nutritious, but also tasty, so that our kids are eating, whether it's during the school day or through a community-based program. As mayor, I will lead in partnership with all of you, and I hope that you will engage with me in this work and making sure that every Bostonian doesn't go hungry.
Thank you, Councillor. And Michelle.
Thank you so much to everyone here and to all the organizers for your work day in and day out, but especially through this pandemic. I know we are, preaching to the choir here about the fact that food touches each one of our lives, and it is so foundational. And we have all seen throughout the pandemic how some of the most visible signs of crisis were related to food: bare grocery shelves, or food workers all of a sudden with jobs lost and families struggling to get that next meal for young people, especially as schools were shut down. And so we have such an opportunity in Boston. We have examples of partnerships and pipelines and legislation that has worked. We need to just break down the silos and connect those pieces. I think often about the lesson from urban farmers that I've heard on this campaign that, you can use any tool when the plant grows, but the most important thing that you need is for the soil to be fertile and healthy. And so for our kids, for our seniors, for all our families, we're going to build that soil together.
Thank you both for a wonderful discussion and for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time and we wish you both well in the primary.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay, so now we're going to move into the second segment this evening, where we will be joined by Councillor Andrea Campbell and Mayor Kim Janey. I think we're just waiting for them both to join at the moment. So everyone, please hold tight for a minute and we will get underway for the second segment in just a moment. Okay, Mayor Janey and Councillor Campbell, you can go ahead and turn your video on. Fantastic.
How are you?
Doing well. How are you?
It's good to be here.
We're grateful for both of your times this evening. We'll go ahead and dive in. Just to reframe for everyone at the top of this segment, as with the first 30 minutes, we will give both candidates 2 minutes to make opening statements, and then we will begin with our questions, which were submitted and compiled by Boston Food Access Council members. You will each have then 60 seconds to answer each question, and we will alternate among questions on who goes first. Each group of candidates this evening is responding to the same set of questions, and there will be a timer on the screen, which we would ask that you be mindful of, and if it expires, we will mute you. As a reminder to attendees, chat has been disabled for the evening, but we do encourage you all to continue to use the Q&A feature to ask questions of the candidates throughout the evening. So, thank you, Councillor Campbell and Mayor Janey, for joining us this evening, and we will get started. So Andrea, please go ahead and kick us off with your 2-minute introduction.
Thank you, Lauren. And of course, thank you for having me and for the work that each and every one of you do to address not only issues of food insecurity that have only been exacerbated by COVID-19, but also the other work that is necessary to ensure that no one in the city of Boston goes hungry. I've been stressing to folks that I love this city deeply. I was born and raised here. I grew up in Roxbury in the South End. I'm a product of Boston Public Schools. I went to 5 excellent BPS schools, graduated Latin and went to Princeton University and then UCLA for law school. Then I came back home to Roxbury and started my legal career representing students in education cases. I've worked as an attorney in the private sector and in state government. But I also talk about the flip side of also growing up in the city of Boston, in the painful side, and the loss of my twin brother, Andre, who passed away 9 years ago while in the custody of a state prison when he was only 29 years old. And so what informs my work every single day is how the 2 twins born and raised in the city of Boston have such different life outcomes. We both grew up poor in the city of Boston. We both at times were food insecure. I remember frequently going with our grandmother to Rosie's place because she was struggling at the time. We both bounced around in the foster care system at different moments. Great instability because our father was incarcerated for the first 8 years of our life. And our biological mom actually would die in a car accident going to visit him while he was incarcerated. And so I have always focused on what did I have that allowed me to be successful and to not only go off to a Princeton University, but to continue to break generational cycles of poverty and trauma.
I had access to Rosie's Place. I had access, of course, to great opportunity. I had access to jobs. I had access to good education, good schools, you name it. And so for me, this work of being an elected and also candidate for mayor is continuing to break those cycles of poverty and trauma and generational inequity, not just for my family, but also for every family in the city.
Thank you. Mayor Janey.
Thank you so much. And I want to thank all of the organizers and sponsors of this important discussion. As someone who grew up in the city, born and raised in Roxbury and the South End, my life experience is very different than all of my predecessors. As the first woman mayor, the first Black mayor, I understand the challenges of so many residents in our city. I understand them because I've lived them firsthand. From growing up in subsidized housing with my mom, being on food stamps, needing lunch tickets to afford lunch in our schools, knowing what it is like growing up with food insecurity, depending on corner stores, sub shops, and pizza shops for my primary source of meals as a teenager. This issue is deeply personal. As mayor, I've been able to lead on this issue. We know that this issue has been made worse by COVID-19. So ensuring that our residents have access to good, healthy food, whether that be through farmers markets, doubling up the HIP and all of the coupons that my mom still uses to get food at our farmers markets, making sure that we're dealing with food deserts, and making sure that we have more opportunities for community gardens, as well as culturally responsive food in our neighborhoods. So critically important. Really glad that we have tropical food in Nubian Square. We have a daily table there that is bringing affordable food. But we've also had supermarkets that don't offer healthy food choices. Right up the street from my house, there was a Save-A-Lot where there was no juice at all. All of the options were drink. We can do better. Our residents deserve better. And that's what I'm doing as mayor, leading this effort.
Thank you both. All right, so we're going to get started with
30 minutes at 7 p.m. So I do want to just note that right at the beginning. So I apologize that I have to leave early, but I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you both. For our first question, according to recent data from Feeding America, the food insecurity rate in Suffolk County is 13.2%. Put another way, that means that more than 100,000 residents do not know where their next meal is coming from. Federal nutrition programs such as school meals, summer meals, SNAP, and WIC are some of our best lines of defense against hunger. These programs serve as great tools to mitigate food insecurity and promote nutrition in Boston, yet are often underutilized due to the lack of awareness and concerns around eligibility. For example, Project Bread estimates that in 2019, just over half of eligible students ate free or reduced price school meals, and less than 1 in 8 ate a free summer meal in the city of Boston. As of March of this year, roughly 66,000 Boston residents are eligible for SNAP and are not receiving benefits. So the question is, if elected, how do you plan to use your role on the national stage to protect and enhance these programs? And how do you aim to leverage and maximize these federal nutrition benefits by increasing access points that will ultimately close these gaps? And again, you will each have 60 seconds to respond to questions. And Mayor Janey, this one goes to you first.
Thank you so much. I'm already doing this work as mayor, wanting to ensure that folks understand the resources that are available. Recently did a video to make sure that folks who are eligible take advantage of this opportunity. It is so critically important. In my early 20s, when I first began community organizing work, did work to organize freedom schools around our federally funded free food programs. So that children who depended on free lunch during the school year had access to it in the summer months. We still have this challenge 30 plus years later, needing to make sure that all families know of what is available, particularly our immigrant communities who sometimes are reluctant to come forward to take advantage of programs because they think it would jeopardize their status here. And so we're doing aggressive outreach so that everyone who is eligible takes advantage and gets the food that they need.
Thank you. Andrea?
Thank you, Lauren. And it is a major issue, obviously, in the city of Boston. I was just recently in Grove Hall section of my district where folks were handing out lunch boxes at a vaccination site. And we walked in and they were gone within probably 20 minutes. And these were hundreds of boxes. So clearly a lot of work to do. The mayor and the next mayor of the city of Boston obviously has a tremendous role in the national stage to be able to transform this system. I've already committed to, as in my first 100 days as mayor, would take action to immediately close that SNAP gap. I would establish a dedicated food policy and nutrition division to help identify and measure and manage not only the SNAP gap, but also to ensure we ease the process and enrollment process for everyone in the city of Boston to apply for all these programs you just mentioned, and that we use a multilingual, multicultural response to ensure people are aware of them. And then also, of course, sharing all of the other programs that currently exist in the city of Boston, and doing that by using best practices from local organizations.
Thank you. Now we're going to move on to the topic of wasted food. There are great organizations in Boston working to reduce wasted food and lessen food insecurity. These organizations are key players in achieving both the Mass Department of Environmental Protection's waste reduction goals, as well as the city's own zero waste plan. How do you plan to support their efforts? And Andrea, you'll take this one first. Oh, but you are on mute, so let me. Are you unmuted? Okay. Go ahead. Oh, no, okay, hang on. You're still on. Should be able to unmute. Are you able to unmute? No, okay. Maybe we'll kick it to the mayor first and then see if we can figure this out. Mayor, are you able to unmute? No? Oh, fun. Okay, well, we have our first technical challenge here. Everyone bear with us for a moment. Oops. I cannot see any reason why that suddenly shifted. Can you try now? Christine,
Hear me?
are you still there? Oh, yes. Hey, look
Okay,
at that. All
I
right.
think my thing froze. Okay, I apologize.
Okay.
But clearly wasn't just me, Janie
That's
too, so
okay.
thank you.
No, all right. Well, we don't worry,
I
we're
don't know
starting
what
fresh.
happened to the timer.
So just to recap, the question was around how will you address the issue of wasted food
That's
and
right.
support the zero waste plan? So
I heard you, you couldn't hear me. Thank you for the question, and you're exactly right. This is a major issue in the city of Boston. And so I have committed in a very robust plan that I put out, very detailed in nature, to one, establish a citywide composting program. We've been talking about this for some time as a way to, of course, make it easier for folks to deal with this issue. I would also support expanding it so it's in every neighborhood. And then lastly, the piece that I think is critically important is working with those organizations and resourcing the organizations that are on the ground that are doing this right now, where they're actually taking food in restaurants in various places in a safe way, and of course, making it available to those who are homeless. There is a way in which the city of Boston can invest greater resources in these programs and organizations. When I talked about this division that I would establish earlier, it is to make sure that all the departments in the city that do this work are actually working hand in hand and not separate and apart and in silos, which usually is the case.
Mayor Janie, are you able to unmute? Hopefully we don't have the same problem. Yeah, okay, great. All right, problem solved. Okay. All right, the next question, the same question to you then.
Yeah, so I, want to lift up Daily Table again. I think composting is great, and we certainly, I can use that in our urban farms and community gardens, but there's actual food that gets wasted before it even gets to anyone's table. And that is food that is close to expiration. that many folks are willing to throw away that can be repurposed and resold at a discounted rate. And so Daily Table and Cobham Square, Daily Table and Nubian Square are perfect examples of this. And the food is actually good. And so there's nothing wrong with going to get some fresh produce or other items. And it's called Daily Table for a reason. So make sure you eat it. But we need to do more too on growing our food. That is a huge gap here. So we need.
And don't worry, we'll get a chance to talk about growing food here as well. So the next question focuses on the Good Food Purchasing Program, which City Council enacted in 2019 and aims to use food procurement practices to improve food systems in the areas of nutrition, workers' rights, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, and local economies while supporting a more transparent and racially just system. Please address how you would support successful implementation of the program. And Mayor Janey, this one goes to you first.
Thank you so much. I think with all of our city departments, we can certainly do a better job around procurement. And the food access piece provides an opportunity for us all. The food access department within the city has been doing important work, making sure we're connecting residents to resources. And as we are thinking about food procurement overall throughout the city, whether it be the lunches that are served in our schools, we do have a responsibility to ensure not only that they are healthy meals and that everyone gets to eat regardless of income or neighborhood, but that we are giving more opportunity to our local, to women, to people of color. Also want to lift up Commonwealth Kitchen, which is right in my community for the good work that they're doing and the role that they play in this space.
Thank you. Okay, our next question does speak to the role of urban farms. So one important role for urban farms has been to support farmers markets, especially in neighborhoods which have had a hard
question, Lauren.
What's that? Oh, I'm so sorry. Go ahead. Tthank you.
At first, I thought I couldn't unmute.
No, thank you for catching me. I appreciate that. Apologies. Please go ahead.
Well, this is critical legislation, of course, on the council and passed by a very progressive council and was proud to, of course, vote in favor of it. And now we need to implement it, right? But we need to take it a step farther. I've committed, of course, to not only establishing this food policy and nutrition division to work across various departments in the city that are often siloed, but to then take it to the next level, not just to convene folks to talk about food insecurity, but to work together to improve and oversee our farmers markets. To, of course, ensure that our procurement process is made easier and allows for vendors of color and women to participate. To make it easier to work with another division that I would start, a hospitality division as well, to make it easier to navigate the bureaucracy that exists in the city of Boston. But it's critical that we don't just convene folks, but we actually activate them and lift up and expand upon the work that many organizations on the ground are already doing. And we don't do a great job of that. 60 seconds, you can't answer.
Indeed, 60 seconds is a short period of time. We know we are a little short on time this evening, which is why we're keeping it quick, but thank you. So apologies again, but one important role for urban farms has been to support farmers markets in neighborhoods which have had a hard time attracting and maintaining commercial farms at their own markets. It's a tough business. Article 89 resulted in the creation of new urban farms, but there are still many cost and bureaucratic barriers which have slowed this process. So what is your perspective on the need for urban farms and what will you do to support this process and support farmers markets? And Andrea, you will get this one first.
Thank you for the question. I'm really proud of my record as a city councilor in supporting the growth and expansion of urban farms and community gardens and farmers markets. I have largely Dorchester and Mattapan, a little bit of Jamaica Plain and Rosendale. These are many of the neighborhoods that are food insecure. These are the neighborhoods where we get calls from seniors who are still going without food. And so we've expanded farmers markets in our communities and in my district to be all year round. We've activated city-owned lots to actually create more community gardens in urban farm spaces. And I've actually committed to activating 100 city-owned vacant lots in my first 100 days as mayor. Right now, we have 30 lots along Blue Hill Ave where RFPs are out to actually make it easier for folks in the community to apply for those lots and to activate them for this purpose. What we need is greater investment in technical assistance. This food division would do just that.
Thank you. And Mayor Janey.
Thank you so much. As an urban farmer myself, I am deeply grateful for this question and want to shout out all of those who grow their own food. I've got a greenhouse right in my neighborhood and so many community farms right in my neighborhood. We need to continue to expand, which is why I am creating a new office within the city of Boston, and we'll be announcing this very shortly, called GROW. It takes public land. Many residents want to use public land for community gardens. Oftentimes there's a big battle to develop the land and create some sort of building or structure, but we're going to do more to make sure that we're creating access to food, bringing people together. This is how I started my neighborhood association in 2009, wanting to do a community farm, and we're going to do more of that throughout the city through the GROW office.
Great, thank you. Our next question comes from the audience, and it is, what is your plan to develop opportunities for increasing local food production in Boston, such as farms, community gardens, and farmers markets? So I guess we just sort of started that conversation, so let's continue it. And Mayor, you'll start this one.
Great. And so I was mentioning in the last 60 seconds, Andrea is right, it's not enough time, that I am creating a new office called GROW, and it is taking public land. Obviously, we still need public land for housing. We're in a housing crisis as well, but there is land that we can use to convert that into farmland, to bring neighbors together. And we've got so many great partners, so many great examples, whether the trustees or other groups that are doing this important work, like the Food Project, that can really help support neighbors grow their own food. This is particularly important as a way to bring neighbors together, to build relationships that are intergenerational, from young children who get a deeper appreciation for eating their vegetables when they grow them themselves, to our seniors in our community. And so I'm really excited about using this as a way to expand access to healthy food.
Fantastic. And Andrea?
I will say, I do want to stress one thing, and it builds upon what we were just talking about, and this is the vacant lot initiative. I'm really proud of that work. You know, it took years in the making to actually not only look at and get the inventory of the thousands of city-owned vacant lots, but then to begin the process of activating them. And right now there are 30 RFPs out for the Blue Hill Ave corridor. And many of those will be used for food production, urban farms, et cetera. But we even redesign the process itself and the paperwork in the RFP process to allow those in local communities and entrepreneurs of color, and residents, and low-income residents and residents of color, to make it easier for them to apply for these parcels in order to reap the economic benefits as well. But there are also other programs like the local lunchbox program and other programs right now that are allowing us to create more jobs in food production as well.
Great, thank you. Our next question is going to speak to language barriers, excuse me. Many members of the immigrant community cannot read their native language, let alone English. What is your plan for leveraging multilingual resources developed by organizations like Project Bread to increase awareness and bridge learning language barriers, to expand access to city resources for those with limited reading skills, including ways to close the SNAP gap among non-English speaking and elderly communities? So Andrea, you will take this one first.
It actually goes to what I was stressing earlier when talking about creating this food division in the city of Boston. Yes, we have an Office of Food Access, but when you think about the magnitude of the work to address food insecurity, it's not just about making sure folks have access in the immediate to food, of course. It's also making sure, of course, that we can expand our production in the city of Boston, that we can create more jobs in the process, all while doing it in an environmentally friendly way. But what good is all of that if people don't know about it? And so there is a way in which, by coordinating everything through one office in one division, that we can be developing and being more intentional on a campaign that is not only multicultural, multilingual, but does use the best practices of local organizations. And there are many, some of course Project Bread, but there are organizations, whether it's community-based health centers, those that traditionally may not be focused on food, but are focused on social determinants of health, that also need to be mobilized and activated.
Great, thank you. And Mayor Janey.
Thank you so much. When it comes to language access, that is a huge priority for me. And you're absolutely right. There are folks who are not literate in their own language. So we have to go beyond just translating and providing interpretation. We have to make sure that we're using visual cues, using more photographs, making sure that we are doing things verbally and using audio messages to communicate. Everything doesn't have to be written out when we're trying to communicate about the good work that we are doing. And so it is important that folks know where the resources are. We know that COVID has only exacerbated an existing issue from neighborhoods all across our city when it comes to food access. And so I look forward to expanding our language access. That is work that is underway. We need to do that as well. And we have to be mindful of the fact that there are all different languages, including American Sign Language.
Thank you. For our final question before closing statements, as mayor, you will have the power to change the food system both immediately and in the long term. How do you plan, or how do you plan to bolster the efforts of the Office of Food Access as it works in partnership with local food system organizations? And Mayor Janey, you'll take this one first.
Thank you so much, and want to just say thank you again. Oh, is it still 60 seconds, or do we get like a 2-minute close?
No, this is your last question, then you get another closing minute, so don't worry.
Okay. All right. So, thank you so much. I thought this was the closing. It is really important that we invest in what we believe in. We invest in our values. And for me, as someone who has experienced this firsthand, I relied on WIC as a young single mom, on food stamps, on lunch tickets at school. This is deeply personal. I bring that lens to this work and want to continue to invest in the Office of Food Access, creating the GROW office so that we can do more around urban farming, make sure that we're communicating clearly to the residents of Boston so that they can get access to healthy food. So critically important, and that the food is also culturally appropriate, culturally sensitive to what people eat. I see I'm running out of time, so I'm going to save the rest for the closing.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, so Andrea, the question again is, how do you plan to bolster the efforts of the Office of Food Access before we go to closing statements?
I think you hit it on the head when you started. Boston's food system is not just about sourcing, it's also about production, processing, distribution, preparation, consumption. And it's all linked, of course, with the city's healthcare infrastructure, the economy, and the climate. And so for me, I think it's reframing and restructuring the city itself around these issues. And so I've committed to do 5 different things. One is establishing a food division to coordinate all of this work and to make sure that it is viewed as a critical piece of our public health infrastructure, to treat food as medicine and working with our leading healthcare institutions as well to scale up their solutions. To make healthy food affordable by closing the SNAP gap, looking at a guaranteed income pilot program and other ways to make it easier for folks in every community to access services. Ensuring and enabling our economy, of course, is driven not only create jobs in certain communities, but also contracts for businesses of color. And lastly, climate and making sure that's a part of it.
Great, thank you. Okay, so now for the closing statements. So we do only have a couple minutes here, so we'll go ahead. And Andrea, 1 minute to you.
Well, what I will say is what I started saying. So obviously in 60 seconds, you can only cover so much. I'm really proud of my food plan, but obviously it's bigger than that. It really does cover sourcing, production, processing, distribution, everything you can think of. And it's practical, it's specific, it's not that long. And I had many folks on this Zoom and the experts in the field inform how I would respond. And to really look at this through a public health lens, to make sure all the departments that are working on these issues are working connected and working in partnership. I had, even though I was poor, we had food stamps. We were very poor, and we were at Rosie's place at different times. We're in the foster care system. Incredible instability as a child, and yet I still always could find food. My family could always find food. So for me, it really is recognizing that this is still a major issue in the city of Boston, prioritizing it, and of course, doing the hard work to make sure no one goes hungry in the city of Boston ever again.
Thank you, Councillor. Mayor Janey.
Thank you so much, and I really appreciate the opportunity. This, again, is deeply personal for me, and I've been proud to expand the work that the Office of Food Access is doing to create a new office called GROW to make sure we are creating healthy alternatives and opportunities to grow your own food in the community all over Boston with public land. We also have to make sure we're doing much more to hear the voices of residents and have this be community-led, and that they are engaged in the process, everything from access to how information is shared in terms of how it is culturally responsive, not just the language, but the food itself, and that it is affordable. This is important. We know that this goes beyond just eating food. It is healthy food that we need access to, and it has all kinds of health implications. So thank you so much for the work you do.
Great. Thank you both for a wonderful discussion. I know we kept it moving quickly with short responses, but we appreciate your time. And we thank you both for joining us this evening during a busy campaign season. We wish you both well in the primary, and we look forward to speaking with you again soon.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you guys.
Thank you, Lauren. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you. Okay, so we are just waiting one moment for our final segment to begin, where we will be joined by our final candidate this evening, John Barrows. Everyone just bear with us for one moment and we will get started shortly. While we wait for John, Joy, could I ask you to go ahead with your presentation to introduce a little bit more about BFAC to the audience?
Yeah, no problem. Thank
Okay,
you.
bear with me. I'm going to go ahead and share that presentation.
Okay, thank you, everyone. My name is Joy Gary, and I serve as the Community Steering Committee member of the Boston Food Access Council. And we just wanted to share with you about some of the work that BFAC is doing. And just starting off with our values, the Boston Food Access Council brings together residents, activists, thought leaders, organizations, farmers, researchers, and other diverse stakeholders to address equitable food access in the city of Boston, recognizing its role in the larger Massachusetts food system. The BFAC asserts that consistent access to healthy, nutritious, affordable, and culturally appropriate food is a basic human right. The BFAC seeks to create an anti-racist, inclusive, participatory culture of learning by building trusting and transformational relationships within the community by engaging residents with lived experience in hunger. The BFAC aims to ground itself in a power sharing model that honors and values all voices at the table, treating each with dignity and respect, and is trauma-informed and self-critical. The BFAC seeks to offer a space to help provide an equitable community-centered platform for food access, affordability, and economic opportunity. BFAC is led by a member-elected steering committee that works in service of the community and is comprised of both community members and organizational members. As you can see here, we have a number of community members and organizational members that have been serving over the past couple of years. And in addition to that, we are supported by an intern, our intern Megan Hoyne Wingate, who has been helping us throughout the season. There are a number of ways for community members and organizational members to get involved in BFAC. The work that we do is done within our working groups. So we do have 4 working groups. There's the policy and advocacy working group that's being co-chaired and headed up by Sarah and Chloe. And the next meeting, we will have information about that more towards the end. We also have our community outreach, engagement, and education working group that is being led by Orlena McQueen and myself. Our next meeting is next Tuesday, or this Tuesday, August 17th at 6:30. And then in our fundraising group, we are pending elections and are looking for co-chairs to join that group. So if you are interested, definitely either to email us, which our information will be towards the end of this presentation. And then the final group is the Mayor Food Access Agenda, which is headed up by Hayen and Christine Becker. And that next meeting is on Wednesday, August 18th at 6 p.m. And so just in the chat, you should be able to see how to become a member. Just filling out the member form it's a very easy process. And our next public meeting will be happening on September 1st from 6 to 8 p.m. Our hope is that you'll join us, learn more about the work that we're doing and getting involved. The work that we do here cannot be done without community members. We need the voice of the community and all communities, not just one neighborhood. And then to join a working group, you can also find the link to that, I believe, will be in the chat or the link to our email. You can email us to find out about that. And to follow us, feel free to follow us on all of our social media sites to find out more about the work that we're doing. Our goal is to seek change in the food system in Boston and affect change in the food system throughout Massachusetts. And so we're hoping to see some of your faces in the coming meetings.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Joy. Okay, so for our final segment this evening, we are joined by our final candidate, John Barros. Thank you, sir. You are right on time. So we are going to kick off, as we have in the prior 2 segments. We'll have you do a 2-minute introduction or opening statement, and then we'll move on to our questions, which were submitted and compiled by BFAC members. You'll have 60 seconds to answer each question. And throughout the evening, we have asked all the candidates the same questions. So there is a timer on screen, and when that expires, you know what's coming, but we'll probably mute you. So you've been warned. Okay, and with that, we'll go ahead and turn it over to you to introduce yourself.
Thanks, Lauren. I want to thank BFAC and the organizers for this forum. For allowing me the time and space to talk about food and the importance of food in our community. I am born and raised in Roxbury and was became an organizer, community organizer at the age of 14. And working with the Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, became the executive director, where I served for 13 years. And food and food security was a big part of how we looked at improving our community, making sure that the community worked for all of our residents. It continues to be a huge issue. Food deserts continue to be a problem. Access to quality food in our local bodegas and corner stores continues to be a problem. Access to good foods in our schools is something that I've worked on for a very long time. But I'm particularly proud of creating a really robust local food production system in my neighborhood, and then protecting it in the largest urban land trust in the country. We were able to acquire urban farmland and then work with some partners to not only produce local foods, but then to sell it and make it available to our residents, to make sure, in fact, that it was part of how people saw them getting their groceries and providing food for their families. This is something we can do more of in all neighborhoods in the city of Boston. And I am excited to have that conversation with you and how I would partner with you as mayor to make sure that that happened. There you go, Lauren. No need to mute me.
All right, we won't threaten you with the mute button, at least not yet. So our first question then, according to recent data from Feeding America, the food insecurity rate in Suffolk County is 13.2%. Put another way, that means that more than 100,000 residents do not know where their next meal is coming from. Federal nutrition programs such as school meals, summer meals, SNAP, and WIC are some of our best lines of defense against hunger. These programs serve as great tools to mitigate food insecurity and promote nutrition in Boston, yet are often underutilized due to lack of awareness and concerns around eligibility. For example, Project Bread estimates that in 2019, just over half of eligible students ate free or reduced price school meals, and less than 1 in 8 ate a free summer meal in the city of Boston. As of March of this year, roughly 66,000 Boston residents eligible for SNAP are not receiving benefits. So the question that I pose to you is this: if elected, how do you plan to use your role on the national stage to protect and enhance these programs? And how do you aim to leverage and maximize these federal nutrition benefits by increasing access points, which will ultimately close these gaps?
Yeah, great question, Lauren. I do want to say that it's important that the mayor of Boston understand that they have a national voice. Boston, in fact, is a prominent city, and as mayor, I will be a champion for making sure that we can access healthy foods for our residents, all of our residents. And then the distribution points matter, but it also matters that we provide quality at those distribution points. And so schools, school lunches, school breakfasts, it's critical, which is why I helped to push the new kitchens in our schools and work with our partners to make sure that we had kitchens and fresh foods and good foods that we can provide our students, not just the access to food, but food that they liked, food that they wanted to eat, and so that they can eat healthy. It's critical too that our farmers market are all robust and providing what people want locally, what the ethnic communities want to eat, and making sure that that's available so that we can have at our distribution points what people want to use.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to the topic of wasted food. There are great organizations in Boston working to reduce wasted food and lessen food insecurity. These organizations are key players in achieving both the Mass Department of Environmental Protection's waste reduction goals, as well as the city's zero waste plan. How do you plan to support their efforts?
Yeah, and so, food waste is a problem. As a restaurant owner, it's something that we talked about all the time. And so, in fact, 2 days ago, we did an order a day before the order was due, and so then recognize it. And it's difficult when you do that to be able to get it to the right people. So we had to get creative, and we've done this often, where we are, repackaging it, making sure that it's individual, and then beginning to distribute them at points where people can use them in ways that people can use them. We can work more with our food organizations, our restaurants, with better best practices on how they can make sure that the food that they would be wasting could be used, bins to put things in, distribution points in their restaurants for different food management, for waste management, in ways that we can bring them to distribution points so people who can use them for recycling.
And there we go. We officially hit you on the timer. Okay, the next question then is on to the Good Food Purchasing Program, which the City Council enacted in 2019 and aims to use food procurement practices to improve food systems in the areas of nutrition, workers' rights, environmental sustainability, animal welfare, and local economies while supporting a more transparent and racially just system. Please address how you would support successful implementation of the program.
It's Demand matters, so you can try to, create different conditions for people to work in. So you can try to change supply chains. It is critical in Boston that as we're looking to change the conditions where people work and how much they're getting paid, that we work with those in that industry, bring them to the table and talk about it in an open way. We worked with restaurants in the city of Boston, for example, most recently to try to change how much they were paying their restaurant workers. And so we brought in a group of restaurants and started talking about what they were paying them and different models that could help restaurants make sure that we're increasing the amount we're paying. We can also do that with food distribution, food access, and workers in different industries that are working on food to make sure that they're being treated right and they're being paid and given what they need to successful in their work.
Okay. Our next question is going to go to urban farming. So one important role for urban farms has been to support farmers markets in neighborhoods which have had a hard time attracting and maintaining farms at their markets. It's a tough business. Article 89 resulted in the creation of new urban farms, but there are still many cost and bureaucratic barriers which have slowed the process. What is your perspective on the need for urban farms, and what will you do to support this process and to support farmers markets?
Lauren, I'm a big fan of local food production, big fan of urban farms and the farmers markets. As Executive Director of Dudley Street Neighborhood Initiative, we help to protect our local farm land, and by putting it on our land trust. We have about 3.5 acres of local farm land in my neighborhood in our land trust, and we have a 10,000 square feet greenhouse that's in our land trust, all about local food production. And then we have a farmer's market that is, really jam-packed, and people come and they buy local food. As mayor, I will help provide more money to acquire land and hold land in trust, either in a community trust or the city can hold it, in fact, on behalf of neighborhoods to make sure that we're protecting it. And that we're making it easy to use, and that we're creating a system around it and how people can get to it and who uses it, and then connecting it very clearly to the local food distribution points like our farmer markets.
Great.
Lauren, you're making me talk really fast.
I mean, that's what we do here in Boston, though. So, okay. So our next question actually comes from the audience, from Kenan. And the question is, what deeper systemic issues exacerbate food insecurity in Boston, and how will your administration get at addressing those issues?
Yeah, there are some deep systemic issues. One that I'd like to talk to in my minute that I have is, sort of one thing that we worked on for a while is the less expensive food choices in our neighborhoods are unhealthy foods. And we have to, I think, work with our businesses to change. There are good options, particularly today, better than there ever has been, for healthy food options that are less expensive. I think we can help change what's being stocked on our shelves for our small businesses. But I think we've got to change the distribution of those, right? Because it's easier to get the folks who provide unhealthy food options at low price points do a better job of distributing. And so I think as a city of Boston, we need to create a cooperative that allows us to buy it en masse and put it on our shelves. So when you walk in with 25 cents, 50 cents, you can get a healthy food option in one of our corner stores.
Great. Okay. Our next question is going to speak to language barriers. So many members of the immigrant community cannot read their native language, let alone English. What is your plan for leveraging multilingual resources developed by organizations like Project Bread to increase awareness and bridge language barriers to expand access to city resources for those with limited reading skills, including ways to close the SNAP gap among non-English speaking and elderly communities?
Yeah, Lauren, I'm a huge believer in helping build the infrastructure of immigrant communities locally. Government we won't be successful if we're just trying to approach our immigrant residents directly. We need to work with local CBOs and immigrant-led organizations who have the relationships, who have established the trust, who have established ways to communicate with our residents in a way that allows them to be more accessible. I even recognize during our pandemic relief efforts that many immigrant families weren't coming to get food. Why? At one point, we had police present, right? And it was a real problem. And other points, They just recognized that it was a government operation. They weren't sure what other questions were being asked, and they didn't feel safe. We need to help provide capacity if we need to build it in our local communities, and then we need to work with those local communities and their leaders to approach our local community members and provide them with the access to food that they need.
Okay, we have another question from the audience, which is, as mayor, what incentives and ways of support do you envision providing small-scale retailers, including minority-owned businesses, which offer nutritious, affordable food in underserved neighborhoods?
Yeah, no, great question. One of the things I want to do is to have a larger distribution co-op that allows us to buy healthier foods at a cheaper rate. The other is to provide technical assistance, free technical assistance, to make sure that, in fact, we're looking at and doing inventory checks on what we're providing our neighborhoods, and then figuring out maybe through a survey what you could provide that people would have some demand for, that you can actually have a return on investment as you're changing your stock. Because many of our stores and our small businesses just kind of copy the last one, right? This is what they have, this is what people are buying, and they just kind of continue to do it. And I've talked to store owners while we've tried to provide healthier food options locally, and they've said, what if they don't come? What if they don't buy it? What if I'm wasting time? So we have to do some studies for our small businesses, help them think about it, pay for the consultants to do it. And as mayor, I will make sure that we have those resources available.
Great. Okay. Thank you. All right. So I know it looks like we have some more time, but we want to leave time for your closing statements and then our closing. So we're going to move to our final question for you before closing, which is, as mayor, you will have the power to change the food system both immediately and in the long term. How do you plan to bolster the efforts of the Office of Food Access as it works in partnership with local food system organizations?
Yeah, Lauren, great question. During the pandemic, many of us saw what a lot of us locally had already known, that there was great food insecurity in our city. And there was a fundamental question about government's role in trying to address it. And I think first, as mayor, it would be clear to our residents, because I believe government has a role to make sure that our families have food, have healthy foods. It is such an important social determinant for not only health outcomes, but also for academic outcomes and other things that we need our children and our families to be able to participate in and be part of. So the first thing is to be a leader in this space and say government has a role, and then to work with our partners locally and regionally to make sure that we understand food distribution and what we need to enhance. So the food distribution department in the city of Boston,
Okay, well, you can finish what you were going to say, though, because what we're going to have you do is go ahead and make your closing remarks to the group.
So Lauren, you enjoy that way too much, but
to be clear, I'm not the one muting. We've got folks behind the scenes, so don't worry. But here, we'll go ahead and start.
Yeah, so we do need to add the resources and strengthen the department right now at the city of Boston. We did a better job of getting grants and resources pulled together, and I think there are more people that would help us in Boston do a better job in that front. I want to say thank you for the opportunity to address this issue. I want to say to those listening today that what differentiates me from the other candidates is I have executive skills and management skills in leading government, in leading organization, and in helping communities think about these very questions that, like food security or the issue of food insecurity and food justice in our city. And so as mayor, I would hit the ground running with my experience and with the ability to implement on the ground in government reform and in neighborhood improvements to make sure that Boston has healthy food choices for all of our residents. Check me out at barrelsformayor.com. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, John, for joining us this evening. We appreciate your time during a busy campaign season, and we do wish you well in the primary.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
Thank you. So thank you to all of our candidates for their thoughtful responses to these questions. In the coming days, we are hoping to receive their written responses as well. In addition to the questions that we asked this evening, we've posed a few more questions, which we didn't have time for tonight, but we hope to post those on our website, which is www.bostonfoodaccesscouncil.org. We will also be posting a recording of this event later on the Boston Food Access Council YouTube page, which you can also access from our website. So to our attendees as well, we'd like to thank you for joining us tonight. We recognize that there were a lot of questions that were submitted, and we want to thank you for engaging with the candidates and with us throughout the evening. We are monitoring all those questions. We have them all written down, and we are going to work to sort of pose them to questions to inform future conversations around food access in Boston with candidates and other leaders. We will, as I said, also be publishing written answers to the questions which were submitted tonight to our website post-event. We hope, as you heard from Joy earlier, we hope you will consider engaging in the Boston Food Access Council by joining as a member, by participating in one of our working groups or more than one of our working groups, and by following us on social media. You can find us on our Facebook page, on Instagram, and on Twitter. We hope that for all of you that this was helpful as you prepare to vote in the upcoming primary election. As a reminder, the primary will be held on September 14th, and your last day to register to vote in the primary is next week on August 25th. We will post the link to the state's online voter registration system in the chat as well. And finally, on behalf of everyone at the Boston Food Access Council and all of those involved in planning and executing this evening's event, I'd like to thank you all, and I hope you have a good rest of your evening.